the news.
Hi, I'm Tessa with Brainrot News with a few bits of news for you to choke on from April 2nd. The Wisconsin Supreme Court has officially defended itself from conservative hands, and the right-wing establishment is spiraling into existential dread. Thanks to Judge Susan Crawford's victory, the court now continues to lean liberal, threatening to do unthinkable things like letting people have bodily autonomy, protecting workers from corporate overlords, and ensuring elections reflect actual votes instead of GOP fever dreams. Crawford, a longtime advocate for democracy and therefore naturally a sworn enemy of the Republican Party, crushed conservative Brad Schmiel despite his glowing endorsements from Donald Trump and Elon Musk, the dream team of tax-dodging billionaires and insurrection enthusiasts. The GOP poured cash into the race, but it turns out that even Musk can't quite buy a functioning democracy, even if he tried to pay people to do it. With Crawford on the bench, the court has already put a stop to some of Wisconsin's finest examples of voter suppression, including bans on absentee ballot drop boxes. Next up, redrawing legislative maps to actually reflect where people live, rather than a GOP-crafted Rorschach test of gerrymandered nonsense. Also on the docket, abortion rights, meaning Wisconsin Republicans might soon have to find a new hobby besides forcing people to give birth. Of course, conservative leaders are devastated. After all, if the courts keep siding with voters instead of billionaires, Wisconsin might one day be a state where democracy functions and nothing scares them more. Republicans have once again triumphed in Florida, proving that in the Sunshine State, all you need to win an election is a pulse and an R next to your name. And of course, Donald Trump whispering sweet nothings about you on Truth Social. But this time, the margins were tighter than Matt Gaetz' legal defense fund. Jimmy Patronis, Florida's chief financial officer and part-time Trump hype man, managed to fend off Democrat Gay Valmont in the 1st District, aka Gaetz' old stomping grounds, presumably now available for rent on Airbnb. Meanwhile, Randy Fine claimed victory in the 6th District, taking over from Mike Waltz, who left to serve as Trump's national security advisor, because somehow a secure nation is a guy who can't even keep an encrypted chat secure. Despite these wins, Republicans are sweating more than Ron DeSantis in a room full of human emotions. The margins were significantly slimmer than past elections, suggesting that even in deep red Florida, voters might be getting just a little tired of the endless circus. Democrats, with their fancy campaign funding and voter mobilization, managed to make the GOP work harder than usual, something they historically prefer to avoid. Still, both Patronis and Fine credited their victories to Trump's endorsement, proving that the president's grip on Florida remains strong. But with the GOP's once monolithic dominance showing cracks, Republicans might soon need a new strategy beyond just pointing at Democrats and yelling socialism. Trump has once again issued a decree from his golden toilet, or maybe the Oval Office. It's hard to tell apart at this point, considering he's crapping all over democracy. He is demanding that Senate Republicans fall in line and oppose the resolution that would nullify his latest economic tantrum. I mean, tariffs on Canadian imports justified under the time-honored principle of making stuff up. The former president claims these tariffs are necessary because Canada is supposedly slacking on fentanyl control, despite actual data showing that most fentanyl seizures happen at the US-Mexico border. But while it facts get in the way of a good trade war, tariffing Canada, America's polite upstairs neighbors, makes just as much sense as blaming your microwave for climate change. But Trump insists it's the only way to stop drug cartels who definitely aren't moving product via the northern border. The Senate is now set to vote on whether to shut this nonsense down, with a few rogue Republicans, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitch McConnell, and Rand Paul, flirting with the radical idea of governing based on reality. If they side with the Democrats, the resolution could pass the Senate, but it would still need to survive the House, where GOP lawmakers remain locked in a competition to see who can be the most obedient to Trump's whims. In the meantime, business groups and economists are screaming into the void about how these tariffs will hurt American consumers, drive up costs, and damage trade relations. But Republicans remain hopeful that they can negotiate something better later, presumably after Trump gets bored and moves on to declaring war on Denmark over Greenland. Just when you thought economic policy couldn't get any more unhinged, Donald Trump has decided to bless us all with Liberation Day, a grand new scheme that will slap massive tariffs on imports like automobiles, steel, aluminum, pharmaceuticals, and computer chips. The idea? Force countries like China, Canada, Mexico, and the EU to play fair in trade. The reality, though? A self-inflicted economic migraine that will send prices soaring, businesses scrambling, and international allies wondering when America will implode. In classic Trump fashion, his his administration is pitching this as a genius-level economic win, claiming it will generate a staggering $600 billion a year. What they aren't mentioning is that this also qualifies as one of the biggest tax hikes since World War II. Yeah, a tax hike from the man who built his entire political brand on whining about taxes. But don't worry, it's not like working-class Americans are going to be the one paying for it all, right? Oh wait, they totally are. Because here's the thing about tariffs. They aren't paid for by foreign governments. They're paid by you. Every car, every can of beer, every prescription drug, every phone or laptop, expect them all to get more expensive. And for what? So Trump can cosplay as a tough-on-trade nationalist while businesses hemorrhage money and trading partners retaliate? Brilliant. Great job. Really amazing. Thumbs up. Economists who must be getting really tired of yelling about this stuff are already waving giant red flags. History and basic math tell us that trade wars don't end well, especially when your strategy is essentially punch yourself in the face and call it strength. If Trump's goal was to tank the stock market, hike inflation, and make it harder for American companies to compete globally, then congratulations, mission accomplished. And yet some Republicans are still doing their usual awkward dance of reluctant support, hoping this somehow works out despite all available evidence saying it won't. Because let's face it, none of them want to be on the wrong side of Trump's next angry Truth Social meltdown. Meanwhile, businesses are left in a state of absolute uncertainty, wondering if they should start stockpiling goods now or just accept the fact that the next few years will be a financial dumpster fire. Liberation Day isn't about liberating the economy. It's about liberating Trump from the need for a coherent policy while his supporters cheer for their own financial misery. If this is the future of American trade, we better get used to fighting over the cheapest cup of noodles. In another totally normal legal battle over whether a president can just mass fire thousands of people for no reason, U.S. District Judge James Bredner has doubled down on his previous ruling, now making it crystal clear the Trump administration's great federal worker purge was as legally sound as a Facebook conspiracy post. This latest ruling means that the restatement order applies to 19 states and Washington, D.C. They were the ones that had the audacity to say, hey, maybe illegally firing 24,000 people isn't great for the economy because surprise, when you dump thousands of workers into unemployment with no warning, states are left holding the bag, paying out benefits while scrambling to fix the mess. Who could have predicted that? Literally everyone except the people running this administration. Or maybe they could, I don't even know. Trump's team insists that these mass firings were all about performance, which is a fun way of saying we just wanted to gut the federal workforce because government bad. The administration is now appealing the ruling to the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, and if that doesn't work, the Supreme Court. Because a small government is when you drag your terrible ideas through as many taxpayer-funded legal battles as possible. Unfortunately, the workers affected by this mess are caught in bureaucratic limbo, waiting to see if they'll get their jobs back or if they're just collateral damage in yet another Trump-era crusade against, well, anything that functions. The reinstatement process is underway, but this case is likely going to be punted around the legal system for a while. Because if there's one thing the modern GOP loves more than pretending to be pro-worker, it's finding new and creative ways to make sure workers actually have fewer rights. So for now, the courts are saying you can't just fire thousands of people because you feel like it, and the administration is screaming, watch us try anyway. Stay tuned for the next thrilling episode of Can the Government Function for 5 Minutes Without a Lawsuit? God bless America, where justice is blind, but only if you can afford the right lawyers, political connections, or strategic alliances with a twice-impeached current sitting president. In the latest episode of The Rich and Powerful People Get Away With It, U.S. District Judge Dale Ho has officially torpedoed the corruption case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams, handing him a dismissal with prejudice. And the reason? Oh, just the mild suggestion that the Justice Department was more interested in securing Adams' political loyalty than actually enforcing the law. Apparently, the best way to get away with alleged bribery and illegal campaign contributions is to position yourself as a useful pawn in Trump's war on immigrants. Why go through the hassle of proving innocence when you can just be politically valuable? Adams was accused of taking shady campaign money and doing favors for a Turkish official while serving as Brooklyn Borough president, something that would normally land an average citizen in handcuffs, but for Adams, it just resulted in a few awkward press conferences and a minor PR headache. The Justice Department then swept in like a political cleanup crew, nuked the case from orbit, and caused such internal chaos that multiple prosecutors resigned in protest. That's not just a legal ruling, that's a full-blown political hostage situation. And Adams? Oh, he's relieved. Of course he is. Who wouldn't be thrilled to walk away scot-free from a corruption case with a lifetime guarantee that it can never be reopened? He's now out here talking about regaining public trust as if it's just another minor scandal to brush off before the next awful thing he does. Because in the grand tradition of American politics, actually earning public white trust is optional. What really matters is whether enough people are tired, broke, or distracted to forget why they hated you in the first place. The lesson here, it's not about guilt or innocence. It's about who benefits from your survival. And right now, Adams isn't just a free man, he's a free asset. In today's episode of Billionaire Accountability is a Myth, a Pennsylvania man is suing Elon Musk and his America PAC for allegedly stiffing him on payments for gathering petition signatures in 2024. The lawsuit, filed by John Doe, which is fitting considering how many people Musk probably prefers to remain nameless and unpaid, claims he was promised $100 per signature or referral, but instead got hourly wages because free market capitalism is suddenly switching to wage labor when it benefits the boss. Doe, who says he's out over $20,000, is seeking class action status, meaning Musk may have shorted more than one poor soul who believed in his weird, unique brand of free speech, also known as paying people to promote his interests, then ghosting them. It makes sense because Musk's idea of innovation is reinventing wage theft. Let's be real, expecting Musk to treat workers fairly is like expecting him to build a functional hyperloop. Sounds good in a tweet, but in reality, it's just a giant vacuum of broken promises. Of course, America PAC is claiming they've spent millions on canvassers, but they reserve the right to withhold payment if they suspect fraud, which is rich considering Musk himself is basically the king of vaporware, overpromising and under-delivering since PayPal. How many Teslas are still spontaneously combusting? How's that self-driving tech working out? And let's not even start on Twitter, which he turned into a right-wing hellscape faster than you can say free speech absolutist. But none of this is new. Musk has always been a guy who pretends to be a champion of the people while squeezing workers, dodging accountability, and cosplaying as some kind of Tony Stark genius. Except Tony Stark actually built things that worked. From union busting at Tesla to turning Twitter into a safe space for conspiracy theorists, everything Musk touches somehow ends up a bigger mess than it started. And now he's dabbling in election schemes, stiffing people on wages, and playing political kingmaker for Trump's second act. Apparently, 2016 wasn't dystopian enough. The only thing more predictable than Musk's grift is the fact that no matter how many times he does this, there will still be fanboys and fascists lining up to defend him. Yeah, another day, another euphemism for genocide. This time, Netanyahu is unveiling his latest war crime under the branding of a security corridor, because when you're forcibly displacing an entire population, it's important to give it a name that sounds like it came from a dystopian city planning committee. This so-called Marag corridor is the newest Israeli land grab, cutting across Gaza to further choke and isolate what's left of its population. The goal? To tighten the noose on Rafah, where over 1 million Palestinians have been herded like cattle after being bombed out of every other city they once called home. It's a textbook siege tactic. Starve them, displace them, trap them, then pretend it's all about security. Meanwhile, Israel's military continues its indiscriminate slaughter, with 40 more Palestinians killed in airstrikes, including women and children. And just to make sure absolutely no one is safe, they also bombed a UN facility because why not? At this point, Netanyahu's government has made it clear that international law is just a suggestion they will not hear. Unsurprisingly, Israel justifies this with the same tired excuses. Hamas won't release hostages, so we must flatten an entire region. Never mind that over 30,000 Palestinians have already been killed, most of them civilians. Never mind that 60% of Gaza is now uninhabitable. Never mind that the so-called most moral army in the world has spent months systematically wiping out entire neighborhoods while the West wrings its hands and does absolutely nothing. This isn't about security, this is ethnic cleansing. It is genocide, and Netanyahu knows that as long as the US keeps sending weapons and shielding Israel from consequences, he can keep pushing Gaza's people into the abyss. The question is, how much more horror will the world stomach before it finally says enough? How much longer can the world lie to itself? Making America great again is when you gut early childhood education for low-income children. Trump's administration, in its never-ending war against anything that helps people who aren't billionaires, kicked things off with a federal grant freeze for Head Start, a program that serves over 500,000 children from struggling families. The result? Nearly 24 preschool centers temporarily shut down, throwing vulnerable families into chaos. Oh, but don't worry, it gets worse. Even after the grant freeze was lifted, mass layoffs at the Department of Health and Human Services have left the program hanging by a thread. Preschool directors don't even know who to contact for grant-related questions because, well, there's no one left to answer the phone. Bureaucratic nightmare? Absolutely. Deliberate slow-motion sabotage of a program that primarily helps poor families? Also absolutely. Advocacy groups are sounding the alarm as Trump's budget cuts threaten to starve Head Start into irrelevance, which, if I'm being honest, is probably the point. After all, why invest in poor kids' education when you can redirect those funds towards tax breaks for corporations and bloated military spending? Why bother giving giving poor people a shot at a decent education. This isn't just budgetary negligence. It's a calculated attack on public services that actually work. The GOP's dream is to turn every functioning government program into a bureaucratic corpse, privatize what's left, and sell it off to the highest bidder. And if that means throwing thousands of children, teachers, and families into uncertainty, well, in the words of the conservative elite, should have been born rich. The GOP's greatest hits: tax cuts for the rich, austerity for the poor, and absolutely no plan to pay for any of it. Senate Republicans are now pushing forward Trump's $4.5 trillion tax cut package because apparently we haven't learned anything from the last round of trickle-down economics that never actually trickled down. The latest grift includes $2 trillion in cuts to healthcare and other vital programs, because fiscal responsibility is when you make sure billionaires keep their tax loopholes while gutting services for people who actually need them. And just to make things extra fun, they're punting on the whole "how do we actually pay for this" question, because that's a problem for future America, or more accurately, future working class Americans who inevitably will foot the bill. Republicans, though, are having a minor family squabble over just how much suffering they should impose. The Senate is taking the "let's pretend we're not totally gutting social services" approach, while the House Republicans are just going full "let's torch the safety net and see what happens" mode. Either way, the end result is clear: massive handouts to corporations and the ultra-rich, paired with a slow-motion demolition of government programs that actually help ordinary people. Democrats, of course, are pointing out the obvious, that this is just another casino-style giveaway to the wealthy masquerading as tax reform, but since the GOP's economic strategy has always been to squeeze the working class, give the rich yet another yacht, and call it freedom, their objections will likely be ignored. All this happening under President Trump 2.0, a man whose 2017 tax cuts already supercharged wealth inequality and ballooned the deficit. At this point, the GOP's economic strategy is basically rob the poor, pay the rich, and let the next generation deal with the fallout. And unfortunately, they're very, very good at it. That's all for Brainrot News. Like and subscribe, and remember, the world isn't on fire, it's just experiencing an unscheduled combustion event.